morning. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to Bold TV. I'm Carrie Sheffield here with Clay Aiken. Did you
fast,
guys like our new intro?
That was fast. You weren't even ready. You were too busy Snapchatting.
I was ready. It was Instagram video.
Or whatever it is. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have one of our biggest shows, I think, this time.
Got an all-star lineup. So.
Yeah, a whole bunch of guests. We've got Gretchen Carlson with us today, so stick around. She'll be here with a new book that she has out to talk about all the recent sexual harassment headlines.
And I mean, her book is called Be Fierce, and it's about women who are being fierce and taking back their power.
Everyone can be fierce.
Oh, yes.
Who else we got?
And then we've also got Scott Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comic strips, with us. Do you read Dilbert?
I mean, everyone is familiar with Dilbert. Everyone has read Dilbert over the years, right? I'm not a comic person as much as I used to be, but Dilbert's kind of smart. It's a clever thing. It's not for kids, so it's I guess it can be for both.
I mean, I read it when I was a kid, but yes.
Well, that's because you were so advanced. And then Deepak Chopra's back with us for I think his third visit. The author of You Are the Universe, and I was out a few weeks ago, and apparently Neil deGrasse Tyson was on. I don't know. I haven't even seen it. I specifically didn't watch before I came in because I want to get it fresh today. But apparently there's some tension going on there with Deepak Chopra and Neil deGrasse Tyson. So hopefully he'll have his calming presence with us, him today. But we're gonna
yes, to help us lead into the holiday.
We need it.
We do. The universe needs it.
Oh yes. Let's see. But we'll give him an opportunity to talk about his book and talk about what I missed, and if you missed it too, then you'll get to see it. We'll play it in a bit.
So what'd you do this week? How's your week, by the way?
Well, listen, I sat and watched the news, addicted to the news all week. I mean, it's always something. There's always something going on. I had an uneventful week. I feel like I'm such a hermit sometimes.
We need to get him.
Calm down, girl.
I've been trying to get him the love of his life. And he's a stubborn one.
My text message thread with Carrie might as well be a Tinder app because it's just guys that keep coming through. What about this? I'm fine. I'm good.
Hey, if you guys have an option for him, let us know.
Keep it to yourselves. Keep it to yourselves.
No. Please share.
Oh God. Okay, now that we've become very uncomfortable.
No, we had a great segment last week on how to set up your proposal, and I'm just trying to help you along the pathway.
Girl, why don't we talk about your love life?
Okay, no, let's move on.
Hey, there you go. So before moving on, we want to hear from you guys on all the week's headlines.
Yeah,
so
we've got some hellos here. Pam Little, hi from Charlotte. Hey, Pam. Maria Lucia Ross, watching always from Brazil. Love the show. We're glad to have you, Maria. And Marilyn Bass
is watching from Chicago. So these ladies are commenting. We hope you do the same too. Make sure you comment, like us on Facebook. How do you do all that social media stuff? I'm no good at it. What happens?
So you go to facebook.com/boldtv. Make sure to like the page.
Okay.
And then for this live broadcast, make sure you put your comments, your questions into the comments box because our people in real time are adding them.
We got people.
You could be part of the show.
We got people.
Our producers, our team, our tribe, our team Bold.
There you go.
Yes.
So those folks are hard at work. You put your comments in, we'll use them. Lots to talk about this week. We'll start with Joe Concha, who's a media reporter and columnist for The Hill, and Teddy Kupfer is a political journalist at National Review Institute. Welcome to both of you guys.
I want to hear more about Carrie's love life.
Don't we all? Really, let's just talk about that.
Go for the jugular.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
No. This is a political talk show.
Yeah, but she wants to talk about
relationships can be very political.
Oh gosh, right?
I'm married.
We did have somebody on a few weeks ago who talked about political relationships where people are dating someone from the opposite side of the spectrum, which, you have Mary Madeline, you've got James Carville. Do you date liberals?
I used to.
I have a feeling there's a story there.
Oh, gosh.
I actually wrote a column
for
Time magazine about why I don't do it anymore.
Next week on Bold, Harry talks about.
No, and actually the Daily Show called me when they saw it, and they wanted me to go on and talk about my dating life. I said no.
Oh, well, see, you missed an
opportunity
right there.
Burning up in this room. It's hot.
It is hot today. It is hot. Okay, what else is hot? What's hot in the news? Let's move on. Russia investigation every week.
Trump is always hot. It's just, the gift that keeps on giving. So, Teddy, welcome to the show. Your first time here.
It is.
And I know, like you and myself, coming from the conservative side, skeptics of Trump last year, especially during the campaign, what's your read on what's happening with, Trump says he takes Putin at his word, that Putin says that Russia did not meddle, and then Trump walked that back a little bit. I mean, at this point, what's the path forward for conservatives as it relates to this Russia issue?
Well, it's always hard to take Putin at his word, but what you're finding from all the news that keeps coming out is that there was definitely an effort by Russia to have an effect on the campaign. The campaign, Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, they were definitely kind of receptive. They had their ear open, but it was so disorganized. I mean, there was a Russian attorney who set up a meeting with Don Jr. There was WikiLeaks who was emailing Don Jr., and he responded maybe once or twice. But this grand conspiracy narrative that you might hear from the left, I don't buy it.
Is there not, and I'll let you both answer, but Joe, is there not something to be said for the fact that while there hasn't been a thread that has shown a conspiracy, there certainly is, where it's kind of that where there's smoke, there's fire argument. And we've seen just yesterday the Judiciary Committee chairs, the chair Chuck Grassley and the ranking member Dianne Feinstein, not only sent a letter to Jared Kushner and his attorney, but publicized the letter because they're kind of, I believe, both of them admittedly very frustrated with the fact that yet again, he didn't divulge all the information they asked him for. He didn't hand over all the things they asked him for. While I'm sure, Teddy, your argument may prove to pan out and be true, what's the deal with not sharing everything? Like, why would you do that?
Teddy touched on the exact point that I would make as well, is that the Trump campaign and the administration, to a certain extent, I think it's better now under Kelly, is not remotely organized enough to collude with anybody, even themselves.
But is it possible that they're so disorganized that they didn't realize they were colluding, that they did things that weren't legal, but now in hindsight they're being asked to do some things, to divulge some things, and Jared Kushner's going, oh shit, let's not show that one to him. We did things that we shouldn't have done, and collusion's not a crime, Teddy. It's not a crime. So, but is obstruction of justice a crime? Yeah. And is there an argument to be made for the fact that by not sharing this information, while you might not have intended to collude, while you might not have known what you did was wrong, by not being forthcoming about these things, that you're probably causing more trouble for yourselves than you would have if you had just said, oh yeah, we talked to him, oops.
That's certainly an argument, but you have to remember how this investigation started out. The target of the investigation, Donald Trump. The idea that there was collusion between the campaign and the Russian government to swing the election. Evidence of that, you'd have to see, emails between Trump or phone calls between Trump saying, "Hey, okay, go hack those emails. Okay, like we're helping you out with this."
Which he did say at his rally. He said,
"Yeah, it's true. Hope you can find them." But I think there would be some folks who would argue that the investigation didn't necessarily start out initially as, did Donald Trump collude? The investigation started out as, how did Russia interfere in our elections?
Right.
And the investigation changed when Donald Trump fired James Comey, and it became more of, wait, is this an obstruction of justice issue? Why did you fire? Again, it's one of those where there's smoke, there's fire type arguments. We probably wouldn't have gone down this path if you had just let James Comey stay in his job.
Yeah, perhaps, Clay. But I think everybody's hands are dirty. I think outside of our media bubble, when people see what's gone on at home, and they see that, yes, Trump Jr. did take a meeting with that Russian lawyer, and there's been other smoke and fire instances. But at the same time, then they see that the DNC and the Clinton campaign paid $9 million to get information from Russian operatives through a foreign entity, and Christopher Steele is MI6 in Britain. So that could be opposition research against Donald Trump. And then you're a Democrat. You're in, what, 2nd Congressional District in North Carolina? Then you see...
I've been gerrymandered out of it again.
Oh, I know, right? That's what I blame. But here's the thing. Then we hear from Donna Brazile, the interim chairwoman, that says that particular primary was rigged against Bernie Sanders. So everybody says, you know what? Everybody's dirty. Everybody's looking for opposition research. Democrats, Republicans, we should be horrified at both parties at this point.
I don't disagree.
And I think that was the major theme of 2016. And I do think there was someone put the phrase that, in fact, I think it was Steve Bannon. He told the New York Times, what we were dealing with was the island of misfit toys. In terms of who was willing to work on a campaign. Like, I'm sure, lots of people in the conservative movement who wouldn't touch the Trump campaign with a 10-foot pole. So to get the A game, to get the people who were sharp and who were doing things precisely as they should be done in a traditional way, they weren't having it at all. So to get the island of misfit toys, the people who, especially Snuffleupagus or whatever his name is, Papadopoulos, Snuffleupagus.
I feel like you rehearsed that one.
No, I actually don't
While to
know
learn how to
his name.
spell
The Greeks trip up everybody in prompter,
Just-
trust me.
No, but he's like 29 years old and like representing himself as someone a lot bigger than he is. Like, what part of just the incompetence of the campaign played a role in this, Teddy?
Absolutely, that played a huge role. Look, I mean, even Paul Manafort, who was supposed to be this grand puppet master, experience in political campaigns back to H.W. Bush, he had his hands dirty in the 2000s. No campaign would have hired him in their right mind in 2016, knowing the work he did for the Ukrainians' Kremlin-aligned political party. And so the issue is you have this Trump campaign that was a populist insurgency. They made some points that politicians have been overlooking for years. They resonated with the people, but they didn't do the groundwork. They didn't do the tough, dirty work to get get the right policy guys on the campaign, get the proper people to do the hard work.
Or in this case, the clean
Or in the
work,
administration.
not the dirty work.
And then the problem is, then they rewarded the misfit toys that actually stuck with them. So Sessions was one of the first senators to endorse Trump, one of the only senators to endorse Trump. So, hey, you get to be Attorney General. Congratulations. And Mike Flynn, you get to be National Security Advisor. And he's gone already. And Sessions may be running for Alabama Senate within the next 5 minutes. I mean,
Yeah, well, and Joe,
that's
but do
the
you think-
consequence.
So it seems to me, so like Manafort, we knew his hands were dirty. We knew that Flynn was already sketchy, and those people are already out. Like, does it seem like we've run through all the misfit toys at this point? Like, there's no one else? Like, I know that for a lot of progressives, they have this fantasy that there will be some other Trump card out there that will kick him out of office. But are we running out of the misfit toys at this point? Is everybody out?
You want to take that?
I
Joe?
think we are. I think we've reached a point. Steve Bannon is gone from the White House. Manafort hasn't been there for a while. The problem is that was part of Trump's appeal. He was an outsider. He was an insurgent. He was hiring people who were, willing to shake up the Republican status quo. And if you look at what's happening in Congress right now, you have tax reform, you have health care reform. These are policies that I personally like, but they might not be policies that Trump ran on. They're not the policies that excited his base. And so as Trump gets more clean, you might be seeing the weakening of his political appeal.
So you got to bear with me for 1 second because this is going to take a second.
Where you been? You barely spoke in the last 5 minutes.
I've always said, that never happens. I've always said that one of the reasons I believe Donald Trump won, and one of the reasons that I still get frustrated with liberals, is that Donald Trump spoke like Americans speak. And, I watch MSNBC all the time. People know that. I admit to it. But sometimes I watch that and I think, who uses words like dynastic? I got so upset watching Chris Hayes last night. And they were talking about the tax plan, and they were using the words like dynastic, and I was like, who fucking talks like that? So Donald Trump did a good job because he speaks like Americans, and Americans have common sense. I can't help but believe, and strongly, that Donald Trump and his campaign and his people and his administration and those folks in his administration, including Jeff Sessions, who was in the Congress, testifying before Congress this week for the 4th time this year, Jared Kushner, Donald Trump Jr., all are making a fatal flaw, a fatal error by forgetting what got them there, that they acted like real Americans and they talked like real Americans. And Americans know, as every 7-year-old learns, that the more you start lying or hiding things or not coming out with full disclosure on things, the less people believe you. And the polls right now even say that a healthy majority of Americans believe that there's something going on with this Russia investigation. And they may not care, but they believe there's something there. And I can't help but believe that if they had just come forward and said, oh yeah, by the way, I did email with WikiLeaks, nothing came of it. This email chain that he released showed that nothing happened.
Of course.
But why did you hide it? And every time I lied to my parents when I was a kid, it made them believe me less the next time. And so every time—
How long did you last?
Not very long. Every time something comes out like this in the paper, I think it makes even Trump supporters. There was a focus group done this week by Peter Hart, a big pollster from North Carolina voters, and many of the Republicans, while they weren't willing to take away their support from him right now and say they would change their vote, many of them were very openly admitting he's starting to weird me out. Things are starting to smell a little funny here.
Sure.
And so why not just
And
be
also,
honest?
look, Joe, you're a media reporter. Is part of why people are getting skeptical and have this maybe aversion or just kind of a dull sense of just distrust, is part of it because of the media? Like, it seems that there's this massive obsession with I mean, the fact that we're talking about it on this show, even like at what point is it like reflecting the news versus shaping an agenda?
Oh, God. I think people are numb by it. There was a Bloomberg poll about 2 months ago that said that 6% of Americans felt the Russia story was the most important story out there. And it was like 8th down the list. Yet you look at media coverage and it gets more than 50% of time in cable news.
Listen, we all know cable news gets ratings, and they put on what rates, and that's
true.
And that's
you made
not
a great point
necessarily the way
before.
to do it, but it's what happens.
You made a
It's
great
not
point
necessarily because the media is trying to push a narrative. I don't think.
The language that's used in certain quarters of cable news, people feel they're being condescended to. Dynastic, that pejorative statement that I made. No one speaks like that. Act like you're at a happy hour and you'll resonate with people more. And
Well, it
that's
works
the
for
thing.
them, right? I mean, it works for MSNBC. I know what dynastic means. I don't use it, but I know what it means. People who don't talk
Wait,
like that
you don't
watch
watch
it.
Duck Dynastic?
Hey, I mean, it works for them, but I will say, and we're going to get down a rabbit hole, and that's my least favorite thing to do. I watched both Fox and MSNBC this week pretty consistently on purpose because I wanted to see, and we'll talk about this later in the show, I wanted to see what was being talked about on each of those networks. And the Roy Moore sexual harassment accusations were almost never mentioned on Fox. And I said almost never mentioned on Fox. They talked about Menendez, et cetera. MSNBC, on the other hand, didn't really talk much about Menendez. They talked about the Roy Moore thing, giving them credit. They did talk about the Al Franken thing a lot, but they did not talk nearly as much about Menendez. They talked about that.
So you're saying they tell the audience what they want to hear.
No, they tell the audience what they want the audience to hear.
Same thing.
No, because I think CNN tells the audience what they want to hear. They're doing it for ratings. I think Fox News and MSNBC are downplaying things that they don't want to talk about and upplaying things that they think are important. It works for them. It's their model. I don't have a network, so I can't say anything.
You're bold.
But I do think, well, it's not a network yet, right, Carrie? So, but I don't know that media is necessarily to blame on just one side, and I think that there's a lot of argument, at least here at this table, that it's one-sided. I would argue that certainly on both sides.
Can I give you a great stat?
Yeah.
All right. 89% of Democrats trust CNN's news coverage. 91% of Republicans don't trust CNN's news coverage. So
Right.
that's all you need to know
Okay, well,
as
we're gonna
far
have
as
you
the
back.
polarization.
We're going to have you back. We got to
Yes.
talk about this more. This is Carrie's
And Teddy
favorite subject.
Cupford. Yes.
Teddy will have you
Yes.
back too. We'll have you back to talk about everything.
And 8-minute dating as
we'll
well
do-
for
we'll do-
the
yeah,
Carrie
we'll
segment
do,
that we have to do.
Swipe left on that idea.
Thank you very much, Joe Concha and Teddy Kupfer. We'll see you again soon. You love that topic, don't you, girl?
Oh, it's like a moth to the flame.
It
Can't
is, but
help
I wasn't gonna bring that up
passion.
in that section. But it does happen. I would argue. I'm not going to do it too much because Joe's left and he can't defend himself. But I would say that a part of the reason that people don't trust CNN's news coverage is because they've been told not to. Because they've been told it's fake news, it's fake news, it's fake news, and a good chunk of the stuff that is on CNN is demonstrably provable, and later on becomes evident with facts. I
Well,
think
I think part of the problem is omission
yeah.
versus commission. So it's the lens of where are you putting the CNN lens? What are you not putting your lens on?
Listen, that's what I was just
a huge
saying. I
part of
think
the
that was.
battle.
You know what I think would be fun to do? We should try it. I don't know how we'll do it here, but we should. I would love to do a true news quiz at some point. The same quiz for people who just watch each network and see how much they would know, because I have found in my life that I'll talk about things that are happening in the news, and people in my life who watch Fox didn't even know they
let's
existed.
get someone who is an arbiter of the truth. Scott Adams, he's waiting on Skype for us. Good morning, Scott. Scott is the author of Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter, and he's the creator of Dilbert Comics.
There you go.
Scott, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Carrie's favorite topic, facts.
Yay, facts. Well, we're glad to have you, and welcome to Bold.
Thank you.
You predicted that Trump would win 2 years before the election. Listen, I am proud of myself for being able to say that I was on record that I thought he would win at least halfway through 2016. I didn't know 2 years before the election. How did you know?
Well, my take on it was based on my own background as a trained hypnotist. And I've been studying the ways of persuasion in all of its different forms for decades. And when Trump came on the scene as a candidate, I started noticing a very deep level of talent that probably is training. Some of it is natural, But there are a lot of factors that go into it. He's good at branding. He's got he knows how to sell. He knows how to negotiate. And I started seeing the tools of persuasion in a way that other people probably wouldn't recognize if they didn't study this topic. And it looked to me like he was bringing a flamethrower to a stick fight, and nobody could see the flamethrower. So that was the basis of my prediction.
Are you saying that he hypnotized the country?
No, he's a corner of the larger field of persuasion. But he's got everything from, a lot of people don't know, when he was a kid, was Norman Vincent Peale, the famous author who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. And that's also a persuasion technique, is to allow people to think into the future of how good things are going to be later. You notice that when he talks about the GDP, he doesn't do what most presidents would do and say, we got 3.1%, that's great, look how well we did, which is sort of looking at the past. The President Trump says, we got 3.1, I think we would have had 4% if not for the hurricane. We're probably going to have 4% really soon. So when he talks about the positive future. And that it seems like a small change, but it's actually very important to take our minds to that optimistic place. And that's the sort of thing that actually drives the economy, because the economy is mostly a psychology machine if you don't have a resource shortage, and we don't.
So it sounds like it worked on you. I mean, I know that you endorsed Clinton at the beginning, and then you switched to Trump, which is certainly notable.
For my safety. For my safety.
For safety. Well, I mean, I guess what's confusing to me is it sounds as if, though, if you are saying that someone is hypnotizing, I mean, hypnosis is not necessarily reality, and even Trump says in Art of the Deal, one of the most popular pullout quotes is how he says, you can fool people for a while, and he admits that part of the strategy of getting a good deal is fooling people and not being completely honest. Hypnotizing someone or having that strategy, while it's effective, doesn't necessarily seem, at least to me, like a quality that folks would want. What made you pull your support of Clinton and move to Trump?
Well, let me clarify first.
Okay.
I'm not saying he's literally hypnotizing people. I'm saying that as a hypnotist, there are a certain set of tools for influence and persuasion that I recognize. So it's a very large field. Hypnosis is a very small part of it that you do one-on-one. Doesn't really apply to the big picture stuff he's doing. But to your question, the reason I briefly endorsed Hillary Clinton is for my safety, for my physical safety, because at the time, if you recall, people were calling candidate Trump the next Hitler. And this is different than other times where they called, the Bushes Hitler and Reagan Hitler. This time people meant it. They actually believed that in a literal sense, he would be a next Hitler-like character, actually rounding up people. And they were accusing me because I was talking about his persuasion talent, not his politics, which I don't agree with on too many cases. But his persuasion ability was so strong, I felt I needed to point it out. And people said, well, you're like Joseph Goebbels, his PR manager for Hitler. And it started to look really dangerous because people were actually getting beaten up not too far from me for being Trump supporters.
I was one of the people who did come out and say, as much as I don't support him, I thought the Hitler analogy was a little bit further than was appropriate. I thought that was not necessarily right.
I thought it was an exhibit of the control that Trump had on people's psychology, that they think that he has that much power.
I would not say I would say that he does have a Goebbels quality to him, though. His ability, the propaganda works. I wouldn't call him Hitler. Do you think that it affected you in your job? I mean, Dilbert's something that people have read and loved for years. Do you think that that your support of Trump affected the way people see you in the entertainment industry, or the way that people support Dilbert?
Yeah, so I had a thriving speaking career in which for probably 20 years I would get at least 2 or 3 speaking requests per week. As soon as I started writing about Trump, that went to 0. And I've closed exactly 0 deals since 2015 when I first started writing about him, because I'm now toxic for large groups.
You need to get Sarah Palin's agent. You need to get Sarah Palin's agent.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Have you on the flip side found a new audience, and maybe are all the Trump supporters now loving Dilbert, and maybe they didn't know about Dilbert before? Have you seen momentum from that direction?
Yeah, I've made new friends, but in terms of my income, it's severely down and probably will stay that way forever because it would be hard to license any Dilbert stuff going forward. It would be hard to have me as a speaker at a group where half of them had been Clinton voters. I'm a little bit toxic right now. So it was pretty expensive,
Dilbert's
but worth it.
not partisan, though.
Dilbert is so nonpartisan. Dilbert
he's
is
real.
just, I mean,
Yeah,
he's just your
people-
office humor. He's like The Office.
Yeah, but people conflate all the stuff about the author and the artwork. So it's hard for people to separate who wrote it from what it is.
Well, and as an artist, does that frustrate you? Because I would like to think that you could be a creative person and work in Hollywood and entertainment and have a Republican or conservative viewpoint, but you're saying that that's hard.
Well, one of the things you learn as a trained hypnotist and somebody who studies persuasion is that you could hope as much as you want that people would not see the artist and the art as the same thing, but it's just not going to happen. People don't have the capacity to separate those things. Those will always be mingled. So I just accept the world the way it is and move on.
Well, hope springs eternal for me. One last question before we let you go. Do you think in 2020 it's going to be Trump again, or use your crystal ball? Who's going to win?
Well, I've said that he might not want to run again if he has a really good 4 years. So if he gets something done on, let's say, taxes and healthcare and ISIS is beaten and let's say North Korea is at least talking to us, I've got a feeling he might want to go out on top and keep the brand as clean as possible rather than risk being a little too old in office. There's a little extra risk those last 4 years if he decides to do it.
Okay, well, Scott Adams, we'll see if you're right. If you're watching, pick up Win Bigly: Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter. Scott Adams, author of Dilbert and author of a book that I think he's onto something. So check it out. Thank you very much for joining us, Scott.
All right, thank you.
Another books, more books, more books. Sarah's back. She missed me. Sarah Hill, CEO and founder of Bookster, is back with us for our Bookster segment, and she's brought back one of our favorites.
Yes.
Deepak Chopra.
No, I come bearing gifts.
Yes, is back with us. So glad you're here. This is your third time. You're going to take my seat eventually.
No.
That's good. That's good. You're the author of You Are the Universe: Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters.
A book that I love
Yes.
and I fully endorse.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone
And
needs to
people
read it.
people
Go
who
to
who've seen your segment have bought it and have commented on it as well. Okay, so I wasn't here a few weeks ago.
Things went down.
They did go down, apparently,
went
which I
down.
was like, what the hell is going on? So I haven't seen the whole thing, but I got filled in on it. If it's okay with you, I haven't seen it. And for those who haven't seen it, we're going to roll a little bit of what happened a few weeks ago for the Bookster segment, if
Perfect,
that's okay.
yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson was here. Let's take a look. Okay, well, let's see. Let's just come back to us. I'm not sure if we have the audio for that.
Well,
but apparently,
basically-
tell us what happened,
So
Carrie.
the audio, what he said was that Deepak has a profound misunderstanding of quantum mechanics, and the Deepak finds words in quantum physics that sound deep and profound, but they're not.
Oh, shit.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson also said that Deepak's science literacy is below what he portrays himself to.
What the hell do you do when I'm not here?
It's
that?
okay. So you know what Neil is.
And I should say, we did give Neil a chance to respond and come on the set, and we'd love to have him come back at any point. I am a big fan of Neil.
What is he going to respond to? You don't let the man talk.
Sorry.
So, by the way, I hope, Neil, you're watching this, and if you're not, I'm going to send you a link.
This is all. I just get some popcorn, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, what's going on?
Neil is what is called a naive realist.
What's that?
Which means that he believes that our perceptions of the world are what the world is really like. But our perceptions of the world are a human experience and human consciousness. So you can't have a knowing of the cosmos. You can't even do quantum physics unless you're a conscious being. All reality is structured, governed, constructed, and comes into existence in our consciousness, including that which we call the universe. So Consciousness and cosmos go together. Never mind quantum physics or science. Science is a method of inquiry in human consciousness. As Werner Heisenberg, one of the fathers of quantum physics, said, nature doesn't reveal herself to us as she is, but as exposed to our method of questioning. Who is it that wants to know? Who is it that is doing the experiments? What is it that conceives of experiments, designs them, and makes the observation? So, any explanation of a universe independent of consciousness is theoretical. So his science is based on faith, that there is something called matter independent of our experience of it. Well, if there is a reality outside of our experience of it, or outside awareness, or outside consciousness, it's unavailable. We'll never know what it is. The only reality we know is that which we experience in human consciousness. It's a human experience, not a dolphin experience. Ask a dolphin about stars. Or, okay, what does the world look like to an insect with 100 eyes?
So are these two different schools of thought, though?
No, they're all schools of thought. Science is a school of thought. Philosophy is a
there's two
school of
different
thought.
schools of thought.
Religion is a school of thought. Everything that we can name or describe is a school of thought. Reality has nothing to do with schools of thought. Reality is that which gives rise to thought itself,
Sarah?
Okay, so I think part of his argument was saying that he had tools to measure fact, right? And there are laws that are now deemed as fact. So what
The
is
tools
your-
are extensions
Of consciousness.
of consciousness and extensions of our sensory experience. And that sensory experience is an activity in consciousness. That's all we can know. So when I ask you what is this, you'd probably say it's a cup or a mug.
Bold
That-
mug.
It's a very important set piece that
actually-
Carrie always wants to be on camera.
Actually, this is an experience. And what is an experience? It's a shape, it's a form, it's a color, it's a sound, it's a sensation, and therefore it's an activity of consciousness. The human construct is it's a mug. So anything that you can name or describe, is a human construct for a mode of knowing and experience in that which we call
Sure.
consciousness.
And what I think Neil said when he was here was that just because I don't know everything about the universe, so we know that only 4.6 of the percentage of the universe is known and that we're able to measure. So much of it is dark matter. The vast majority of it, we actually don't even know how to measure we don't know how to describe it. But what he did say was that even if I don't know all the details, I at least know the bounds of it, is what he was saying. So because I know
So
the bounds
who is
of it,
the I that knows what it knows and knows what it doesn't know? What is that I? If you say that I is this body-mind and the universe is separate from me, then you're already starting with the wrong premise. This body-mind is as much an activity of the universe that I'm observing. The I that experiences body-mind and the universe as a unified activity is consciousness.
Well,
There's
and I
no
think-
consciousness and cosmos that are separate. Consciousness and cosmos are complementarities. And many scientists will say that. He's a naive realist, he's a naive skeptic. He needs to be a radical skeptic. Question the existence of matter itself, because what we call matter is the interpretation of this experience. Where is that experience happening?
Okay, listen, is this a thing that's been going on? I mean, is this thing between the two of you something that's happened
It's
before? Or is
actually,
it
it has been going on for 35 years.
between the two of you?
No, between
Oh.
me and the self-proclaimed militant atheists.
Okay, but
like
you had
Richard Dawkins,
that's been going on
many
before
men. That's
Jesus,
been going on
so-
for a long time.
Right.
And what they started off by calling me a charlatan 35 years ago. I was on the cover of Skeptic magazine. Now the
got a cover out of
skeptics,
it.
now the skeptics are on the defense because what we call matter turns out to be immaterial. The source of the universe is immaterial.
Okay, but let me ask this, though, because I admittedly don't understand it. I'm not going to be a quantum physicist or any of that at any point. But
Maybe.
when you wrote your book, you did it with a PhD. in physics. It was a
Professor.
A professor, sorry, but with a PhD. Why
In physics and
what's the
cosmology.
value of having someone who thinks, I'm assuming, somewhat more like Neil deGrasse Tyson does, to do the book with you if you don't necessarily have the same?
No. Neil deGrasse Tyson serves a purpose, and that is creating a construct that is useful for doing technology, for creating instruments. But the empirical universe, that which we call the factual universe, is not even 4%. It's 0.01% of what exists out there, because the rest is invisible. Even the rest of the atomic universe is invisible interstellar dust. And the atomic universe, notwithstanding what Neil might say, subatomic particles are also waves of probability. Particles have mass and energy. Probabilities exist in mathematical imagination. So the universe that they describe is a useful model, but no model is reality. You know, Rumi, the great Sufi poet, says God's language is silence. Everything else is poor translation. And that includes science.
Well, so one thing that I've seen Neil say is that even if we don't know everything about the universe today, our knowledge has been constantly expanding. You know, look at what's happened since the Enlightenment, since the Industrial Age. So even though we don't know everything now, we will know in the future. And that's why he, in his own way, has faith, in my opinion. He has faith that science and the observability will explain the
Without
natural world
answering, but
incomprehensibly.
without asking the question, who's the observer? What is the observer? The more we have knowledge of the universe as an external observer, independent reality, which is based on faith, okay, the more knowledge we have that, the more we lose sight of that which wants to know.
But didn't
Okay,
Neil
so
say-
that kind of knowledge is actually ignorance of the true self, which is where all reality is constructed, conceived, governed, and comes into existence.
But he also said that we are stardust. He's the one who convinced people everywhere that we are made out of stardust.
Yeah,
star particles,
we are
right?
stardust
So
beings
saying the
with
same thing.
self-awareness.
We are
he
the
also
universe.
said that the universe spoke to him.
Yeah.
When he was a boy, which I was
Same
like,
thing.
you sound like
We are stardust. We are stardust with self-awareness. We are actually, this brain is the observation deck for the universe to look at itself
yeah.
through a human experience, not through the experience of a mosquito or an insect with 100 eyes or a bat that knows the world through the echo of ultrasound. There's no such thing as a universe. That's a human construct for a species-specific mode of knowing and experience.
So now, listen, I may be a realist. Or maybe I may be completely
Skeptic.
confused. A skeptic, I don't know. but even you admitted and said that there is a value to the thought. The
There's a
world of thought.
practical value. I took
Then how does it? So what makes it? How's it wrong?
because it pretends to know, or states anyway, some people, like naive people like Neil and many others, it says that my methodology has answers to the meaning of existence, what love is, how do I know what I know, what is the meaning of death, is there a God, are we just an accident? None of these questions can be answered by the methodology that we call science. It's a method of inquiry in human consciousness. Okay, so is religion, so is philosophy, so is theology.
Is it not just? Is it
Reality,
not just at some
though,
point-
may I say something? Reality requires transcendence of thought.
Is it not just at some point though that it's like religion in a way that some people choose to be Catholic and believe a certain thing, and some people just want to believe this is a fucking cup, you know, and that's all it is.
We created it. Just as you created the construct of a cup, you created the concept or construct, I have a body, I have a mind, there is a universe. These are all activities of consciousness within consciousness.
Right, but is there not a way-
Feelings, thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, and their interpretations, period.
Right, but
we
I'm not going to say-
we participate in the creation of that which we call the universe.
But I'm not going to say that someone who is Jewish, I grew up Southern Baptist and have a very different belief set than someone who grew up Mormon or grew up Catholic. I'm not going to say to them, just personally, that what they believe is wrong or it's naive, because, you know, I don't want them saying that about my stuff. is it okay to say that about someone's
I
beliefs?
think what we have to really question is our habitual certainties, whether they come from science or religion or theology or philosophy. We have to take time to be silent and just be. And when you are silent and just being, you recognize there's a knowing element in every experience. Spiritual traditions call it the soul, spirit, consciousness, fundamental reality, whatever. It doesn't matter. That which knows this experience is not in time. Because once upon a time, this experience was a baby. This experience was a toddler. But the knowing of that experience in consciousness is the timeless factor.
But it is a provable fact, right? That the baby will become a teenager and will become an adult, and it's going to happen that way.
That's an activity. It's a process. Where is that process happening? Where is the knowing?
But it's provable that it's always going to happen.
Yeah, what we call laws of nature are regularities of experience.
Got an answer for everything. I'll give him that. I'll give you that.
But the laws are always bendable, is what we see.
Yeah,
That's
moreover,
what-
nobody
Is it
even...
bendable that you won't become an adult at some point?
The laws evolve,
isn't.
but what they are is regularities of experience in human consciousness. But nobody even knows why there are laws. I've asked cosmologists and quantum physicists, so yeah, there are laws. Why do they exist?
Well, and also evolution, to see what was an adult, like the evolution of the Homo sapien. Like this has been a millions years
Sweet
process.
mercy. I tell you what,
just-
what I've learned on this show is that we all have to come together, and sometimes I just have to be here and disagree with everyone else who's here.
I think-
and so I'm going to have to do that
I
today.
think we have to lose our arrogance, our hubris. We have to exchange our cleverness for bewilderment. This is an amazing
I can
experience
promise
that
you
we're having.
we got to go, but I can
That we
promise you
exist.
I am bewildered.
That, if we exist, should be a perpetual surprise.
You come back and keep on trying to convince
Oh, I
me,
love
and we'll
that.
get
I
Neil
still have more
deGrasse Tyson.
questions.
We're going to have to go, so make it real quick.
Sorry, I talked so much, but
it's
I want to send this to Neil.
Well, we'll
I
send
have
it.
one more question for you.
Jesus in heaven. One more question. We got to go.
Because it's Thanksgiving. Deepak, what are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for existence. I'm thankful that we are having this conversation. I'm thankful that I have grandchildren, that I'm thankful that I can experience love, compassion, joy, equanimity, and this adventure that we call existence.
Well,
it's the biggest
we're
mystery
thankful-
that we exist.
We're thankful you join us, and come back.
thankful
You'll
for
be
you.
you're one of our most frequent guests. We'll get Neil deGrasse Tyson. Maybe we'll get you both on at the same time.
Please
That'll
do.
be a hell of a bookster segment. Sarah Hill, thank you very much for being
Thank
with
you.
us. Deepak Chopra.
Thank you, Sarah.
We'll see you again
Welcome on
soon.
your
Thank you
show,
guys
too.
very much. Whew.
my
I
gosh.
get, you love that stuff. I get
I'm obsessed with it.
sometimes
This
you
is-
are.
I wake up.
Sometimes I'm confused by it. I'll tell you one thing though, that is a concrete, unbendable law of nature.
But the
When
laws
we
of
have,
nature
when the
are
clock says
bendable.
we've got to move on to the next segment, girl, you got to
That's
move on to the
true.
next segment.
This is true.
That's what it
the
is.
bold segment laws do not bend.
Sarah's sticking around with us, and she's brought a big star to the set with us today. We're so pumped that Gretchen Carlson is here with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Clay and Carrie and Sarah. Great to be with you.
Thank you very
Great to
much.
see you again, Carrie.
Thank you. Yes. So I'm a huge fan of Gretchen, and there's Queen Gretchen, and then there's like Superwoman Gretchen. And I knew her when she was Queen Gretchen, and now she's Superwoman Gretchen. So
For sure.
I used to go on her show a bit when she was a host on Fox News.
Because she's fierce,
And
right?
She's super fierce. And that's why
fierce.
she's here. She's here to talk about her book called Be Fierce, Stop Harassment and Take Your Power Back.
It could have also been called Bold, actually,
Be
right?
bold.
Listen, that's a
sequel.
tease to her. She gets so excited
Yeah.
when that
We
happens.
can co-write it.
The topic of the book is right on the cover. It talks about it. It's incredibly timely, obviously, because it's in the news right now. I think a lot of people would argue, and you may not want to agree, but I might agree that you were in a way kind of the start of showing women that they should be empowered to take back, the control and take away the power of men to harass them.
Well, thank you
How
for
does
An
that- how does that-
organization
how
that
does-
no one thought could be
Right.
taken down.
How does it
right?
feel?
That was
Right?
like a boys' club.
Did you know did you believe when you started talking about it? And I know we aren't going to talk about specifics at Fox, but did you know when you started talking about it, or even believe that it might lead to a discussion that would become, every single day we're having women who
Never.
stand up and speak about it.
I mean, how could I have ever known that?
But that was your call to action.
It was my call to action, but 16 months ago when I theoretically jumped off my cliff by myself, how could I have ever known what was going to happen to me the next moment, much less the next day, the next couple of weeks, and all the developments just within my own story. And then what happened was I started hearing from all of these women across our country, and men. But they proved to me that it was a pervasive epidemic and that it was in every workplace. It was in every kind of profession, from waitresses to Wall Street bankers. And all these women said to me that their voices had never been heard. We can see how that plays out now with all these other stories, right? Why are their voices never heard? Because we automatically call them liars. We automatically say they just want to be rich and famous, and that's why they come forward, right? I mean, there's all these myths. So all of
Were you
these
scared of
women.
that before you did?
Well, of course, I knew that was going to happen. Of course, when you're, I want to give credit to Anita Hill as well. She started this whole thing 25, 30 years ago, but then there was a lull. And when you're another first person to take that step forward, yeah, I knew I was going to be taken down and maligned. Toughest, most excruciating choice of my life. But these women who reached out to me, they were really the impetus to put together Be Fierce, because I wanted to give them a voice finally. And look where we are today.
It's amazing.
Look at the bravery and courage that is contagious.
So I have a question. You, correct me if I'm wrong, but you recorded the conversations for a year, right?
I'd
Or
love to be able to tell you all the
can't
details
talk
of what
about
I
it?
did, but I
Yeah.
can say this. Chapter 4 is my playbook. It's my 12-point plan, and one of the points is to gather evidence. How
Yeah.
important that is, because we still live in a he said, she said culture.
What do you say for those folks, women and men, yes, who don't have evidence? I mean, we've seen a lot of stuff come out. There are some who do have that, but a lot of women probably don't have,
Right.
men, I got to say, because there were men too,
Right.
aren't going to have the ability to have the resource that you did to do that, or the foresight to do it. Are they able to still do it if they can't follow your playbook? What do they do?
Well, first and foremost, get a copy of the book so that you can do all of this. I mean, document. And what I would say to them, if there is no critical evidence, is to tell at least 2 trusted colleagues. It's my 3rd point in the playbook. I know how difficult it is to summon up the courage to do that, but you have to have witnesses. You have to have somebody who will say, yes, on December 5th, 2015, she told me this happened to her. We've seen that happen now in a lot of the stories that have come out recently, where you'll see that they did tell people. They told their husband, or they told their mother, or they told a friend. And that documentation as sourcing, as a 2nd or 3rd or 4th source, has been crucial in believing these women.
Right, at the time too, and not later
At the time, right.
You're also doing a tour, a city tour, right? Giving.
I've been on my book tour for the last 4 weeks. Proud to say that it's been on the New York Times bestseller list, which I'm incredibly proud of, and I'm proud of all the women who have come forward as a result of it. But I'm going on a college campus tour as well. I just kicked it off at Drexel University. I'm going to be going to Harvard and my alma mater, Stanford, and Duke and others. And I think it's incredibly important to get to our young people with this message. I'm also going to some high schools across the country, because really that's where it starts. The whole last chapter is on parenting. How do we choose to raise our boys and our girls with gender equality? And so that our boys especially can see respect in the home, so that they take that later on when they go off to college potentially, or when they get into the real world, that they carry those same values and respect for women. That will really be the final tipping point, when men like you, Clay, will finally stand up for women in the workplace too, and not be enablers and bystanders, but be allies. That will be the true tipping point of solving this
I
problem.
think there are some who would argue that they have done that, and certainly, but I tend to be the devil's advocate on this show, so I'll do it again.
I like it.
But I read something in Huffington Post this week about, and it was an op-ed, but it was about Vice President Biden and how he may not be the right person for Democrats to be pushing out in front right now because of his role in the Anita Hill hearings, and the argument that the Clarence Thomas hearing, and the Anita Hill testimony, because of the fact that he made a statement when he was chairman of that committee that he was going to get the facts, and that he didn't believe her until she had told him the facts, and people were really down on him about that, and I guess. Most of the stories we've heard in the last several weeks or months have been demonstrably provable, or if not, incredibly documented, and they told these folks, so you do believe them. But was Vice President Biden wrong to say that he wanted to get the facts from her first, because someone is innocent until proven guilty. Is there a danger to immediately telling someone, taking away their show or firing them or getting rid of making them drop out of a Senate race without having a trial or any opportunity for them to actually be proven guilty versus
So here's the big problem, is that as a society, we've decided to solve sexual harassment allegation cases in one of two ways, and both are secret for women. Settlements, where women can never tell you really what happened, although people can go online and see my complaint if they want to see all the salacious details. And then the other way is what I'm fighting on Capitol Hill right now, is forced arbitration clauses in employment contracts. 60 million Americans have them. They don't even realize they have them. What does that mean? It means that if you file a complaint at work about sexual harassment or discrimination, that you go to this secret chamber where you don't get the same amount of witnesses or depositions. There are no appeals. Only 20% of the time does the employee win. I'm fighting on Capitol Hill. I'm very optimistic I'm going to have bipartisan support for this bill in the House and the Senate.
you did it
and
with-
take the secrecy out.
You did it with Al Franken, though, which is interesting.
Well, not
worked
anymore.
with
We're looking for a new co-sponsor.
Right, but so
of the
my
bill right
question
now.
is, and I can understand why you might want to look for another co-sponsor because he's not necessarily a great face for it right now, but that kind of goes to my other question. Is it possible to be a champion for women, to be an advocate for women, to be a good man, and still have sexually harassed somebody?
I mean, I guess if you realize from your mistakes and you have repented and you have moved on in a courageous fashion, yes. I mean, America's all about second chances, right?
Is it
I think there's a
possible for some of these
difference.
folks,
I think
though?
there's a difference between one incident of sexual harassment and a serial predator.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a lot of the cases that we have seen with high-profile people, the allegations are that they're serial predators, right?
What about the allegations that might have happened a long time ago? Because I think that's another thing that we're
It is. It's
seeing.
another myth. We're seeing it with Roy Moore in Alabama. Why did these women wait 40 years? He's had other elections. Why are they coming forward now? They're coming forward because this is a watershed moment.
Yeah.
And it's a tipping point moment. And so they're suddenly feeling comfortable that they might actually be believed. So, my response to that is that I don't criticize women or men for coming forward no matter how long the time has been, because we have put them in a box, either in secrecy or in shame. And those are the two things that we're shattering right now. I also just want to make sure that we point out, as all the revelations have proven, that sexual harassment is apolitical. Before somebody harasses you, they don't ask you what political party you're in.
Right.
They don't really care. And
there-
that's why
but
all
the
Americans
response-
should
But
care.
the response has been, I mean, listen, I like to think I'm a self-aware person. I may not always be, but I'll admit, and I'm ashamed of it, I'm ashamed of admitting it, when the revelation about Al Franken came out this week, he's somebody who I wanted to run for president in 2020. When I saw it on the news, in the back of my mind, the first thought that I had was, oh, he was just joking. Now, I didn't say that I think I probably might have only
thank you
said
for
that
being
because
honest.
he's a liberal, and I like him as a,
Right.
I mean, I certainly have seen it now, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty bad. But I think it is political to some degree. I mean, the president this morning tweeted about Al Franken, hadn't said a word about Roy Moore. Is it, while it's
disingenuous.
it's cross-partisan, the offenders are, but it is still somewhat partisan, the response, right?
Totally. I mean, that's what we're seeing play out in Alabama, right? And I wrote a piece for Time Motto on this that just came out yesterday, which is we have reached rock bottom in our political divide. I mean, I'm so glad to see you two together, because this is what we need to do more
We
of.
don't always get along.
No, I know, but this is what we need more of, to be quite honest. It's very disheartening to me that people on either side would say that even if the allegations are all proven to 150%, that they'd still vote for a child predator. That's sad. That it's more important that the other person doesn't get into office, so we're going to not recognize that somebody may have been a child molester. That's crazy in 2017, that we're in that kind of an abyss of political divide.
But don't the voters get to decide? I
They
mean, that's the
do.
argument.
They do get to
But
decide.
But they seem to be.
And I get that question every day. How could President Trump have these allegations against him and yet nothing happens as a result, but we're watching these big, huge private company titans fall? And that's my answer,
I
right?
think
indicates
the
our
result
priorities,
of him
though, right?
being our president, is the backlash is that women everywhere are finally speaking up. I think after the march and after you coming forward, women feel comfortable saying like, hey, this isn't okay anymore.
Well, and it's interesting to see Senator Gillibrand has said that Bill Clinton should should have resigned.
It was very fascinating.
I
wasn't
She
think
it?
that- I
paused a
think
long
that-
time before she said it too.
Well,
I
no,
wonder
that's-
how much she was thinking about re-election, and then at least she said what she thought.
Or more.
And that's what one of the Clinton supporters said on Twitter. Said, "Well, hey, Senator Gillibrand, you were fine taking decades worth of money and support from the Clintons, and it's only now."
This is all a result of the watershed moment, right?
Right.
It's the Clinton situation probably would have been handled differently had it been happening right now,
How
right?
long do you think this will last, this watershed moment?
I think it's amazing it's lasted this long because in the news business, we change stories like this. Even mass shootings, we go off of them quickly now, right? So the idea that we're still talking about this weeks into this latest tipping point, I think you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Well, there's a new one
I think
every
there's
day.
a new one, and I think
there'll be more.
And that's why. So the woman who accused Senator Franken and had the photo, she said her Me Too moment came because she heard a congresswoman talk about
Spear
her Me Too
from
moment.
California, yes.
So she was emboldened by hearing it from a sitting member of Congress who was vulnerable to say this happened to me. But to the point on the question of rehabilitating the men. So like let's say or the women, there are I think about 10% of people who are victims of sexual harassment are men. This is Essie Cupp said on her show on HLN. But when you're looking at the men themselves, largely, so like Mark Halperin, for example. Is there a way to rehabilitate him? Like, what's the end game for someone like Mark?
I have no idea what kind of courses you have to go to figure out how to respect women. And, listen, sexual harassment's all about power. It might, an ancillary part of it might be that sex is involved, but it's really about power over somebody. And let me make sure that I bring this up. I don't think we should have so much discussion about how we rehabilitate the potential predators. Why aren't we discussing about all the thousands and thousands of women who've lost their jobs, who reached out to me in this book as a result of having the courage to come forward, and they never work in their chosen profession ever again? That is outrageous.
Well, I have two questions, and I was going to do the other one first, but I'll do this one first because you brought it up. Everyone we've seen, this watershed moment has been because people are coming out and revealing their experiences and the fact that they'd been harassed or assaulted in some cases by powerful men who the Washington Post or the New York Times care enough about to put on in the paper. When most of the stuff happens in companies and businesses and places where, your boss isn't going to end up in the paper. It doesn't matter where you are, who they are.
Maybe
the
in a
paper's not
local
gonna do
paper.
it.
Maybe in a local paper.
Maybe, but maybe not. So what about those women? What do they do?
So the every women is what I like to call all of them because that's the multitude of the victims, right? It's not just famous people. It's not just TV people in Hollywood. And my hope for them, the more thousands that have reached out to me since the book has come out, is please go to your local media. Because now more than ever, they may be interested in actually doing your story, right? Maybe not a year ago. Maybe not when my story came out, but that is my hope.
Well, not if
that those women
not
are
if you're
vindicated
in a
as well.
small town and your boss owns the factory that keeps the town
Well,
alive.
true,
right?
but that's why I'm doing all my work on Capitol Hill to take the secrecy out of it as well, right? So listen, there's not just one solution to this problem, and this is what I lay out in the book. It's changing legislation, which I'm behind. It's parenting. We got to start with that in teaching gender equality, right? It's getting men to be on our side. Most men want safe work environments for women, but it's getting them to have also the courage to stand up and speak up, right? It is so many different prongs that have to come together. It's more women and men coming forward. It's so many different things. It's changing the way in which we look at this, which I think we're starting to see a shift. Oh yeah, I actually might believe her when she comes forward instead of automatically calling her a liar, right?
Sure. Well, and you mentioned people coming together, and I think that harassment can take many forms because, like you said, it is about power. Like I've had middle-aged female bosses who were insecure about a younger woman, and they blocked me, and they felt, and they like one of them even said to me, "When I was your age, I was doing this, and I don't think you deserve this job," even though she didn't hire me, and she stopped my professional growth. So in that way, I consider that a form of sexual harassment, and I see lots of women competing with each other instead of lifting each other up.
Totally.
So how
You
do
know, I've
tackle
always
that
been an
problem?
advocate of women.
Absolutely.
And I've got scores of letters and notes from younger women that I have helped because I got help. It's essential that as women we do that. But here's one of my theories about why that happens. So few women actually make it to the higher ranks of businesses that maybe you have the one token VP, right? And then that woman finds herself in a conundrum. Does she stay with the old boys club or does she help the women beneath? I write about it in the book. So my call is to fix this, businesses need to hire more women in top positions. Not only does that help younger women with the ranks and the treatment they're getting from the higher up women, but it changes the society also about sexual harassment, right? I interviewed an international cosmetic firm in my book. 70% of their employees are women. They have a really progressive way of reporting sexual harassment. But guess what? They don't get many claims. Why? Because 70% of their workforce is women.
But doesn't that threaten men? Doesn't that say like, oh, they're going to take my job?
No. Listen, as long as 94% of Fortune 500 companies are still run by men, we have a lot of work to do in getting women in top
Well, and
positions.
there was a member of Congress this week, a male member, who said in response to the questions around, training, Speaker Paul Ryan said mandatory training for sexual harassment, and there was a congressman that said, if we put all these rules and regulations in place, it's going to disincentivize hiring women. What would you say economically, and like we've seen some of that in Europe where
Who
they
was
put
that?
a lot of, I forget his name.
My dad has
Find
said
it out, we're
that.
gonna
My
put it on
dad has
blast.
said that to me. He's a small business owner. And he's like, oh, hiring women is just like hard. I'm like, come on.
I know. So I've been debating on Twitter this morning with because Vice President Pence had that idea that women should not be able to go to off-site meetings with men. What about looking at it the opposite way? Like men should just behave civilly,
Yeah.
and then we wouldn't have to worry about it because you're stunting women's growth. So the idea that the blame, listen, the shame and the blame should be transferred to the appropriate people here, not that it might happen to a woman, so she shouldn't be able to go to an off-site meeting and stunt her professional career, but what about just getting rid of the random jerks so that we don't have to deal with
So
this?
is there not I'm breaking my own rule about timing here, but this is very important. Is there not at some point does there not need to be some sort of definition, though? Because I think that maybe one of the things, and this is me playing devil's advocate again, but maybe one of the things that concerns this congressman, Vice President Pence, your dad, when he mentioned it, is that I think there are times when some men don't know what's harassment versus what's flirting. Certainly these things, Al Franken, Harvey Weinstein. But I had an experience with someone who's been in the news several years, who's been in the news and been accused many years ago, which made me uncomfortable, but I didn't feel harassed.
Right.
It was just someone being a dirty old man.
I appreciate you bringing that up because there are two forms of sexual harassment that are on the books as far as laws. Quid pro quo, which is actually saying sleep with me and I'll give you an office with a window. Or, the hostile work environment, which is subjective.
Right.
But I have to say this. Of all the women who've reached out to me and men with their stories, the stories are so outrageous that there is no gray area.
Right, you're right, but George
so-
Takei got accused of something where he, I guess, touched someone at a party, and I know George, he's a lovely man. I'm not saying I don't believe the thing, but anyway.
Well, the majority of the cases coming forward are not. Here's
They're
what
not
here's what I
ambiguous,
want to
right.
make clear. It's not like Clay, I love your sweater, okay? Or Carrie, that green dress looks really beautiful on you, okay? That's fine in my book. And I'll include you. I love your pearl. I love your pearl necklace.
Someone who says that they don't like the fact that
Well-
someone put their hand, the man he touched
Well,
her,
touching
her back.
is a different. I have to tell you that the idea of touching somebody brings it to a whole new level. I've learned this from all the lawyers I've been hanging out with.
They're not sexual assaulters at all.
No. But, I share in my book experiences that happened to me when I was Miss America and early on in my career, where it was pretty obvious when the guy was on top of me in the backseat of a car with a ton down my throat that was actually assault.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There is certainly
So
a line,
there,
but
of all the people who reached out to me, it was pretty clear cut.
Yeah, well, and I think it really gets to your conscience. Like, I think we're programmed or wired to have a conscience, and if you're not listening to that, like, there is a very, very clear line, and once you cross that line, like, there's something that your conscience is speaking to you, and you're choosing to ignore it. And I know that faith is part of your journey, and I want to ask you about just looking through that lens of faith, and when you're dealing with a harasser, like for example, Roger Ailes, like, he passed away suddenly, unexpectedly. Like, how did you feel about that passing when he was gone? It came out of nowhere, and just knowing the history.
Well, because of my settlement, I can't comment on that. But what I can say is that faith was my rock and foundation, or one of them, besides my family. And I know you and I have had conversations about this before, and I'm happy about your journey. But I just have to, it's such a personal choice for what you rely on in your life. But when you make an excruciating choice like this, I was glad to have the foundation of faith in my life to be able to buoy me, as well as my parents who are still living, and I'm blessed to have them, and my husband and my 2 kids.
Well, we got to let you go.
Thank you,
we
Clay,
go-
Carrie,
Be fierce.
Sarah.
Make sure you check. I want to know
Yes.
what morning show do you watch now?
I watch all of them.
All of them.
I am having so much fun.
What's your favorite?
Nope. Nope.
You could have said you had an easy way to just get out of that question.
BOLD.
Yes.
Gretchen Carlson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Check out her book. Check out her book. It's so important.
Yes.
And we're going to have to
Thank
get going
you.
because I think they have to grow
Gretchen.
tomatoes in this
Yes.
studio later on.
You guys are really good. I like it.
Glad that you could join us, Gretchen.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick look at some of our social media influencers. In this segment, we asked them to tell us someone they admire even though they disagree with them politically.
Let's take a look. We're making this a regular thing.
Yeah, it is. Or we won't. How about
Let's
this?
see.
How about I'll
There's
tell
our
you who
audio.
I admire. I admire Gretchen Carlson because of the work she's
What?
doing. What?
Gretchen is independent, though.
Well, okay, yeah. I admire you.
Aw.
Okay,
You
we
sound
do
like
have it.
you were searching for
I
that
did.
one.
Well, I was searching for it. We do have the segment now. Let's throw it up.
Hi there. My name's Kimberly Corbin, and I am a mother, survivor, and advocate.
Hi, you know what's bold? Bipartisanship.
Hi, Bold TV. My name is Jacob Airy. I'm a staff writer at the Daily Wire. I'm also a social media coordinator and host of Studio Jake on YouTube.
Hello everyone, my name is Matthew Boyer and I am the Media Relations Associate with Students for Liberty.
Somebody I admire from the other side of the aisle is Michelle Obama. She has an incredible way of portraying her message, and she delivers them with class and grace that I think is so important when we look at who we want to have as role models for our children and for ourselves. Now, I may not always agree with her politics, but at the same time, it is evident in the way that she messages and speaks to groups that she's passionate about what she's saying.
I admire conservative Tucker Carlson. We have a great time debating on air. Off air, we get along. That's being bold.
I admire Dave Rubin. He hosts an interview show on YouTube. He's always very fair. He doesn't go after the person he's interviewing. He's very open-minded. He listens. He does ask hard questions, but that's okay. And he is part of this coalition of conservatives and liberals who are saying, hey, let's stop pointing fingers. Let's sit down together and have a conversation.
Someone that I necessarily don't agree with is Bernie Sanders, and the reason that I respect Bernie Sanders is because despite our political differences, me being a libertarian and him being a social democrat, is because Senator Sanders is principled in what he fights for, and he's still willing to reach across the aisle and have those open debates and have an open civil dialogue with respect. That's something that America needs, and that's something that I believe in.
And who do you admire? Let us know. Put it in the comments. Who do you admire from across the aisle? We want to hear. I agree with Michelle Obama. I think she's super classy.
I can't come up with one every
Yes.
week.
It's all right. It's all right.
Lord,
It's been,
not
it's
that
been an
many.
exhausting show. We had a
It
lot
is.
of like.
You stuck with us
Yes.
for a little bit longer this week, so thank you very much. We won't dock your time too much. We'll have a special Thanksgiving episode next Friday. That'll be a little shorter, so you get a little bit of time back.
Yeah.
We appreciate you joining us. Tune in next Friday at 10 a.m. for a little Thanksgiving message from our team. Are they going to be doing? Bold Business next week?
That's right. Yeah, we will have Bold Business Tuesday. So come back
This
for
week?
that, 9 a.m. this coming Tuesday.
Except
with
for I
David
don't think they'll be
Grasso.
here next week. I don't think they're doing it next week, are they?
I think
All I know is I'm looking over your shoulder and they're all shaking their head no. So probably not next week,
they're not.
but we'll all be back the week after Bold Business on Tuesdays at 9.
Yes.
And we'll be back here on Friday as well. So thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend and a wonderful holiday.